On this episode of Bite Sized, we are watching and discussing the 57th scene of the movie Twilight. For those of you watching along at home, that's from 1:31:18 to 1:32:15. And now, on to the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of Bite Sized. If this is your first episode, here's what's going on. My name's Ben. I am your host. I'm watching the movie Twilight one scene at a time with a different guest every week. I find someone to be on the show. I send them around 90 seconds of the movie Twilight, and then we talk about it for a half hour. Speaking of guests, joining me on today's episode is a Twilight enthusiast, a Twilight podcaster in her own right. She is one half of the Gender Forking Twilight podcast. Sam Saucier, welcome to Bite Sized.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to be honest. As I was doing your intro, I completely panicked that I forgot the name of your show that I've looked up several times over. Thank you. I just need you to know that I have zero faith in myself as we start this off.
Yeah, no problem.
Cool. So I'm going to start this interview the way I start every interview on the show. That is by asking you, Sam, what is your history with the Twilight franchise?
Oh my God.
I have a feeling this is going to be a long one.
Well, I first read Twilight when I it was like before the 8th grade. Mm-hmm. So I was like 13 years old. I was so obsessed with Twilight and huge Team Edward stand from day one. And you never go back on that. So I would still say that I am today, even knowing all the problematic things I do about Twilight. I still like to say that I'm Team Edward.
To be fair, what are your alternatives? Like Team Jacob is not that much better.
Yeah. So when I was 13 and being so obsessed with Twilight, falling in love with the Pacific Northwest and the rainy vibes, I the school year after I read Twilight, I changed my the way that I dressed. I think I had a very colorful year in 7th grade and wore makeup and stuff. 8th grade, stopped wearing makeup.
Yeah.
And I only dressed in the kind of cool, understated color tones of the Cullens. So navies and whites, stuff like that. They had a thing going and I wanted to be a part of it.
Now, had you seen the movies as well, or were you taking your fashion sense straight from the book?
That would be crazy because the fashion that comes out of the book is not something that I typically trust.
No.
Because Edward and Bella notoriously love wearing khakis, which is not it for me. I think I did take it from the movie more.
Okay.
Even though they're not totally separate, but yeah, I did read and then watch the movie, but yes, I did. When you're in the throes of a hyperfixation.
Sure.
As a preteen, in the height of the Twilight phenomenon, in the pinnacle of the cultural moment, I think I would have had to have a superpower to be able to resist. So.
Yeah, sure. Is this a love and a fandom that stayed with you through the years, or did you ever sort of step away from Twilight?
I did step away from it. I would say shortly after I was into it because of that huge cultural pushback being, that especially targeted at young girls being this is so stupid, whatever.
Yeah.
Which is so tired now.
It is.
So I think I did step away from it for a few years. And then I started finding my way back to it in college, which is where I met my best friend Lori, who is my other half of Gender Forking.
Who listeners will hear next week.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, the first time that Lori and I hung out one-on-one was to watch Twilight because we'd been talking about it. We were we need to really revisit this thing that we both loved because it's crazy how good that still is and it's bad but it's good, and we were just enraptured by that period of our lives and everything that came out of it. So yeah, we started watching Twilight together and discussing it, and then eventually we started our podcast. Lori and I both studied women's and gender studies in college and in grad school, so our podcast kind of naturally took that tilt, that lens, so to speak.
There's a lot of that to sort of analyze and discuss in the Twilight franchise.
So much. Yeah. Oh my God. It's actually atrocious. And it's kind of like a little feminist book club between just the two of us.
Yeah.
We recorded it after we graduated from our undergraduate degrees. And then over the course of the last, I mean, that was 2018. Okay. So over the course of the last, God, has it been 7 years?
It has been 7 years since 2018. Yeah. Math checks
Illegal.
out.
Yeah, we've been slowly recording our podcast. We started actually with Life and Death, which is Stephenie Meyer's gender-swapped version of Twilight, published in 2015.
Oh man, I've talked about this a couple times on my show. Never too much in depth. The only thing I sort of know about it is the choices for the switched names are so bananas to me.
It is so bananas. Yeah, which is like such a Mormon thing too. Like Mormons have a thing about their names being spelled in a special way. So yeah, I would say like we've started talking about gender, Mormonism. There's so much about race and class in Twilight that we've been able to unpack, especially around the portrayal of a real indigenous group of people.
Yo, boy, yeah.
As well as the sort of like colonizer narrative of like the Cullens and like and like how that comes out in the story versus like what the real life implications are for like the portrayal of this group and like the ongoing fandom. So there's some like really real stuff that we talk about, but also it's a very silly podcast. We just kind of laugh about everything.
Sounds hilarious.
Roll our eyes. And yeah, I know it's like, oh, there's so much violence in this story, but also it's like, yeah, you have to laugh or you go crazy.
But we are here for a reason, and that is to talk about the scene of Twilight we talked about today. Mm-hmm. The brief overview is Bella is in a car with Alice and Jasper, and there are some vampires running around Forks, and then they drive all the way to Arizona, and that's sort of the brief overview. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of the episode. Mm-hmm. We start this scene. Bella is on the phone. She's leaving a voicemail with her mom.
Mom, it's me again. You must have let your phone die or something. I'm not in Forks, but everything's okay, and I'll explain it later.
She leaves a very vague message, and it was in the rewatch that we did right before we started recording this that I realized this is not a great message to leave for your mom.
No.
It's like 3 or 4 sentences. She just says like, hey, Mom, I'm not in Forks. I'll explain later. There's nothing stopping her from like explaining now.
Yeah.
Like she should give a little more context to her very worrying mother that like what exactly is, because there's nothing worse than like a vague text or Bella just did like the voicemail equivalent of sending her mom a text that says like, we need to talk.
Yeah,
like
literally. Yeah.
Please, God, please give some additional context so I'm not freaking out until I hear what you have to say.
Oh, God. Yeah. It's like way too easy to lie to Renee also. I feel like it's something that comes up in the story. Yeah, she's giving her little voicemail to her mom, who's like, I think in the movie canon, supposed to be notoriously bad with technology.
Yeah.
I feel like that is something that came up earlier in the movie. I feel like the phone call things like really come into play at the end of the story.
No, you're right. I was thinking about that as I was prepping this, is because this is like the second or third time we've seen her on the phone calling her mom. And like the first time she calls Renee says something about like how she's always losing phone chargers.
Yeah.
And Bella is now leaving a message because like, I guess your phone is dead. And it's just sort of this weird, like, why are we I don't know why that matters so much. Maybe there's more to it in the books, but it just seems kind of...
Yeah, well, in the book, Bella doesn't even have a cell phone until Edward gives her one, like, for this specific trip.
Weird.
Yeah, so she only has one, like, to contact him, basically. I love that about Twilight, is that, like, how primitive the technology is in 2005.
I my first thought was, that's odd, but then I remembered the first book came out in 2005.
Yeah,
when a teenager with a cell phone was rare.
Yeah, she doesn't have one. I mean, I don't even know if her mom has one in the book. I don't even know if she'd be calling, like, would she be calling her mom's cell phone? Would she be calling her mom's house in Florida? Like, I'm not really sure.
That's another great point. It's 2005, 2008 in the movie. Bella should be calling her mom's landline.
Her mom's landline, yeah.
Maybe we can assume she did and Renee didn't pick up because she's at a batting cage or whatever.
Yeah. She's at a baseball game.
I guess.
There's a lot of baseball in this movie. Yeah.
So much baseball in this movie. Another thing, I get worried that fans will hate me because I talk too much about baseball.
That's like one of those things about Twilight. It's like sometimes I'm just completely at a loss for what to say. And that's when there's like sports or cars.
Yeah.
And Stephanie like is really obsessed with the car thing. So.
And weirdly, the baseball thing, again, listeners, I'm sorry. This may even get cut out because I feel like I talk too much about baseball. But like, I'm a huge baseball fan. And the baseball stuff that Stephanie chooses to include is crazy to me.
Really?
To sort of distill for you a conversation I had with a previous guest, Renee is dating Phil, who is a minor league baseball player. Specifically, he's a AA baseball player. And I don't know how familiar you are with the sort of baseball minor league system, but anyone who is a AA baseball player is either 19 years old or bad at baseball. So the fact that is who Renee is in a relationship with, just like, I could examine that fact for hours.
Oh my God. Yeah. This is why Bella left.
Yeah.
This is why Bella went to Forks so that her mom could watch minor league baseball.
She doesn't want to live with her mom's boyfriend who's making $18,000 a year playing bad baseball.
You're so right.
Ugh.
Well, I also wanted to shout out the beginning of this scene, Carlisle's Mercedes. Speaking of cars, we're in Carlisle's black Mercedes,
we are in Carlisle's Mercedes.
I appreciate that. Even though I'm like, I feel so whatever about the cars, I appreciate that the movies like got the cars right and like paid attention to them.
That is, yes.
But I will say, and maybe, I mean, you were just saying there's so much conversations in cars in this movie. One thing that just absolutely cracks me up is how slow they're going in all the interior shots, even though they're supposed to be speeding, because the Cullens notoriously drive fast.
Right.
It's always like the slowest car ride ever.
Especially because they're driving to Arizona. We see this a little bit later on the scene. We see some big, beautiful mesas.
Yes.
Which is a 27-hour drive away from Forks. So it's nice that, like, you know, Jasper is driving. He doesn't have to sleep or eat or go to the bathroom. So really, other than like stopping for gas and getting food for Bella, you can just sort of drive straight through to Arizona, which is nice.
In the book, it's supposed to happen overnight. And I did notice... I know in the previous scenes, like when they're in the garage, they're talking to Laurent, all this stuff, it's nighttime.
It's dark.
And then in the shots of them leaving Forks, it's day.
Sam, this scene is weird about time, and we're going to get deep into that.
Let's do it.
It breaks. Oh, God. You're just like, you're doing such a good job of touching on everything I want to talk about. And I have no idea what order I want to go in. But let's talk about time, because this is where the editing of the movie, you have to pay really close attention because it just time jumps everywhere. We start with like, the very opening of the scene is them driving past the Welcome to Forks sign. And then it cuts to them like driving through a desert. But this is intercut with like Edward and James and like some other sort of vampires running around Forks in that sort of right around sunrise time. So like we'll see Bella and Alice and Jasper leaving Forks. And then we see Edward running through the forest with Emmett and Rosalie rubs up on a tree in Bella's jacket to leave her scent there. And then we see Bella and Alice and Jasper in Arizona, presumably 24 hours later. And then we cut back to James smelling the tree that Rosalie rubbed against just a couple cuts ago, which makes me wonder, like, is there some weird time jumps going on? Like, are we flashing forward and flashing backwards? Or are we to assume that James just sort of hung out around Forks for 24 hours and is just now getting around to that tree?
Yeah, I actually would wager that it's some time. Like, I don't think he's running right after them while they're laying that trail. That would be my guess. I also don't necessarily think that we're supposed to be in Forks in those shots.
Oh, really?
Because I think that because Edward and Rosalie and Emmett, I suppose, in the movie are leaving this false trail. They're trying to lead him away. And I mean, in the books, well, I don't know about in Twilight, but in Midnight Sun, which if you ever want to just read, I recommend reading the end of Midnight Sun to just get Edward's insane perspective on the crazy shit that happens in this sequence. They like go to Canada. They're like running around Canada. James steals a plane. Like all this stuff happens.
Makes a lot more sense. I didn't consider the fact that they would also be 24 hours away from Forks in the other direction.
Yeah. So I think that they're trying to lead him away in order to like capture him, which obviously doesn't work. And that's kind of what we get in the scenes, that gets the sense that their trail is false, right?
Yeah.
So the time is weird. I mean, I also canonically, I think that drive is supposed to be overnight. It's supposed to only take them like until the next day to get to Phoenix, maybe not even 24 hours. So who knows really what's going on and where they are. But it's kept very vague here.
It's nice having someone a lot more familiar with Twilight Am on the show, because you can give satisfying answers to questions that the movie just sort of leaves hanging.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, even if I think, yes, there are answers to things that the movie leaves hanging, but also there's so many unanswered questions.
Oh, yeah. For every one that gets answered, there are 2 or 3 more that are just out there.
Yeah.
My last really big question that maybe you can answer this scene, maybe is addressed in the books, that is for sure not addressed in the movie.
Oh, sure.
And is kind of the most confusing part of all this is, just one scene ago, the plan was for Edward to take Bella to Vancouver. I'm assuming because the Cullens have friends or property up there where they can sort of lay low for a little bit. At the very beginning of this movie, Renee moves to Florida. So my question is, why the hell are they taking Bella to Arizona? What is there?
So I have beef with the movie for this, because they'll make this, they make it all the Cullens plan. This is what we're going to do, whatever. In the book, it's all Bella's idea.
Sam, this show could be called I Have Beef with the Movie Twilight with Ben Aver, so get it all out.
Yeah. In the books, Bella is always the mystery solver, which makes sense because she's the protagonist of the novel.
She needs something to do, yes.
Yeah, so she's usually like, because of that, I would say sometimes she's like smarter than the Cullens because she's always the one piecing things together. I think that the idea here is, they don't think that James will believe that Edward and Bella would be separated.
That makes sense, yes.
So they are trying to lead him away. In the argument that she has with Charlie, right, she's staging the idea that she's going to be going down home to Phoenix. And even Charlie is saying like, it's empty, that she's not there or whatever. But Bella's like supposed to just be really distraught and be like, I don't care, like I'm going home, like I need to be in Phoenix, which is my real home. And the idea is that like James is supposed to be like, this is a false trail, but they're like, no, we're really going to bring her down there to hide, basically.
The idea is James can hear the conversation of Bella saying, okay.
Yes, they might even show him, he's like listening to this argument, and that's why it's okay. So it's staged for Charlie, but it's also staged for James.
This is a double fake out.
Yes,
that winds up not at all working.
No, yeah, he catches wind of it. I think that's why they're heading to Phoenix, just as a place to hide that's far away. I think they don't want to go to Florida because they don't actually want Bella's mother to be anywhere near what's going on.
No.
Yeah.
Well, and that's too far.
Yeah.
It just seems like if you're going to take, I guess that's where Bella grew up, so she's going to feel at home there in this traumatizing situation is nice. Yeah. But like if you can take her sort of anywhere, take her somewhere closer.
Yeah.
Take her to, I don't know, San Francisco or wherever. There's a lot of other places you can stop.
Somewhere like completely random, perhaps?
Yeah.
Not tied to anything that they might be able to track down, maybe.
Right, exactly. Or just somewhere closer.
Yeah.
Somewhere that won't require Bella to spend almost a day and a half in the back of a car.
Yeah, and even longer in a hotel room. Yeah, it's an interesting...
It's an interesting 58 seconds that was never meant to be viewed as closely as we have viewed it today.
Yeah.
It's true of Twilight and probably of most movies, that if you watch them with this kind of scrutiny, they will fall apart a little bit. A lot of parts of every movie is just, we got to get to the next thing. So let's just whoosh, 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 cut through a few stuff. Don't worry about it. Here's the next plot point.
Totally. Yeah. They're like, one thing I thought was funny about this scene was when Edward and Rosalie and Emmett are running through the woods, and poor Rosalie, she's still in her baseball outfit. Man. And she's got Bella's jacket on, which supposedly has enough of her scent on it to like lead a false trail, right? And she just, to quote unquote mark the tree, she just brushes up against the tree. And I'm like, would that really do it? I guess.
I guess if you're like a vampire and you can smell really well.
Yeah. I mean, I think when it comes to like vampires smell, I feel like what is like scent, you know, like when a dog is like tracking something, like what are they smelling? I feel like they're smelling like left behind oils, like dead skin or hair, like I don't know. But James is like a super good tracker. That's like his superpowers, so he would be extra good at following those sorts of things. So maybe that's why it's extra hard to lead him astray.
Maybe. I gotta say, that's about half the scene that we really didn't get into, is what Edward and Emmett and Rosalie and James are doing. We spent a lot of time talking about the people in the car because they need to answer for a lot of stuff. But what I love is that in the last scene ended with Carlisle telling Edward, "You're coming with me," and then Emmett and Alice get in a different car and drive off. And then this next scene, Edward is not with Carlisle. Emmett and Alice are not, or Emmett and Rosalie. That's it. There's too many names.
I know.
Too many people. I can't keep up with all this. Emmett and Rosalie are not in a car. They're running around. The Cullen plan just fell apart immediately. They have zero teamwork. They cannot stick to a strategy.
It makes me feel, I'm like, okay, well, where did Carlisle and Esme go?
What are they doing?
I know where they're supposed to be, like in book canon, but like they just kind of totally disappear from this whole scheme.
In movie canon, Carlisle said, "Come with me," and then didn't go anywhere.
Yeah. So I don't know, but when they're in the car and Bella is like, has this moment of kind of like longingly looking at Alice and Jasper holding hands in the front seat.
Sure.
Yeah. Which, by the way, their relationship is just so inscrutable and I can't understand it. But did you notice what Jasper's wearing on his wrist?
No, I didn't. And I've pulled up the scene now and I'm going to try to see if I can find it. He's wearing, is that the Cullen wristband?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Even though, he's not a Cullen though, right?
Well, he is. I mean, I think like the official story is that, you know, the official story is like he's a foster child or whatever, and that he and Rosalie are twins.
He's Jasper Hale. Yeah.
But they're Cullens. They just don't call him a Cullen because he's married to Alice.
Wow.
You know? So
I've never noticed that before.
Yeah. So, but have you seen Edward wearing that as well?
Yes, that is more prominent.
Yeah. I just brought it up because I think it's so ugly.
Yeah. And it's also like, it's weird. Does Carlisle like make those?
Apparently.
Or like have them.
This is a movie only thing.
Yeah. Oh, wait, these are not in the books?
No, they don't have a Cullen family sigil in the books.
Why do
This is something that was made up for the movie and for some reason
to sell merchandise, I assume?
Yes, you could buy this. You could definitely buy this at Hot Topic back in the day.
I was just about to say there was probably a little basket of them at Hot Topic circa
Absolutely.
2009. Yeah.
Hey, Editor Ben here. I was looking around and sure enough, that sigil or that crest has been available on all kinds of merch and still is. You can get a full Twilight jewelry set on Amazon for only $300. For a little more on this, here's some insights from a TikTok creator named Sarah Gallagher at SarahElizabeth_talks on TikTok.
If you were like me, maybe you owned something with the Cullen crest on it. You could buy a wrist cuff. You could buy a t-shirt. Catherine Hardwicke says in her director's notebook that this lion right here represents strength and ferocity because of vampires. The disembodied hand up here represents loyalty. And these little shamrocks here, they might not be shamrocks, but shamrock-like things represent perpetuality, or that these living forever, which again, if you're trying to lay low, probably don't want that on your crest. Again, these people are trying to lay low in high school. They are all dating and they are all wearing the same family crest. So I don't think this is the best idea.
But the wide leather band with the huge sigil on it is just insane to me.
At first I thought it was a watch, and then I saw that the band was like way too thick to be a watch.
Yeah.
That's weird. What is going on with these people?
I don't know.
And you know what? These are the kind of questions that I don't have to answer in my silly little movie podcast.
Yeah.
Have fun deep diving into that on your
thank you.
actual smart person show.
Shout out to the music in this scene.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the Twilight score. Carter Burwell really popped off. Yeah, I'm just a fan of the scoring. That was a fun part of me rewatching it many times, just to listen to that little part of the song with like Bella's lullaby with like the intense drums underneath.
Mm-hmm. Let's start to wrap this episode up.
Let's do it.
The last question of the interview portion and the first moment I warned you where I'll sort of put you on the spot.
Do it.
If you had to give this scene a name, what would it be? And this is also going to be the name of the episode, so make it good.
Oh, okay. Oh.
There's not a lot going on in here from which to pull a name.
Yeah.
But I trust your ability to do it.
Just James's incredible sense of smell.
James is
James. How do you say the James?
James's incredible sense of smell. Not James is two words, but James with the possessive apostrophe.
Yeah.
Sense of smell. And I'll figure out the proper way to spell James's before this goes live.
Just shout out to that incredible nostril flare that he does at the end of this scene.
That is a really good
with
nostril
his
flare.
eye roll that he does, and then I think he growls and runs away or something.
Yeah.
Shout out to the actor who played James. I think he did an excellent job.
Hey, that's a question that I forgot to ask. Is when he's making that face, it's sort of we don't know exactly what he's thinking. Do you think he's smelling Bella and thinking he's on the right track, or is he smelling Rosalie and thinking, I've been fooled, and turns around?
I think he's realizing that he's been fooled, because he does run away right after that.
He does, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that is supposed to be tipping us off to the fact that he's been tipped off.
Well, then, Sam Saucier, if people like the sound of your voice and maybe want to follow you on social media or hear you talk about Twilight on another podcast, where can they do those sorts of things?
Yes, you can listen to Gender Forking, a Twilight pod. Oh my God. See, I said my own podcast name wrong.
Gender Forking at twilight.com. Yep, you got it.
You can listen to Gender Forking, a Twilight Saga podcast, anywhere podcasts are available. You can also follow Gender Forking on Instagram at Gender Forking. You can follow us on Tumblr at bowlingshirtbellas.tumblr.com. If you would like to do a real-time read-along of the book Twilight, you can go to twilightinrealtime.substack.com and I'll send you date accurate sections of Twilight to your inbox as well.
Yeah.
And come on over. One thing that people say about Gender Forking is that they like to listen to it even if they don't know anything about Twilight. They just enjoy us sort of telling them what happens in our own perspective. So even if you're if you don't think you're a fan, I think you're wrong.
Yeah, or if you are like me and wonder if the insane gender politics of Twilight make more sense when you flip all the genders, check out Gender Forking and maybe you'll get those answers that this show cannot give to you. If you want to follow this show on social media, you can follow at bitesizedpod_ on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, where I post short clips of the show that are great to share with friends and convert new listeners. You can also follow this show on Tumblr at bitesizedpod_. I intend to do more stuff with it there than just posting clips of shows you've already heard. So send me an ask or something and give me a reason to engage with that platform. Speaking of engaging and sending questions, if you have a question for me, you can send an email to myfavoritetwilightpodcast at gmail.com, an email address that is a lot more fun to say when there's not another Twilight podcaster
okay, you can have it.
Sitting across the Zoom room from me. Sorry, Sam, I got there first.
Right.
As I always say, apologies to all other Twilight podcasts. All that information and more available at twilightpodcast.com. Another website, another domain that I got to first. Sorry,
That's
other
amazing.
Twilight podcasts. Thank you to my editor, Ben Oxter, for putting this all together. Thank you to the band Swimwear Department for letting me use their fantastic song Mauled to Death as our theme. And that is it. That is all we have for today's episode. As we always say at the end of every episode,
Wash your hands.
wash your hands. See you next time. And that was the other moment I was worried about.
Hey, Mom, it's me again. You must have let your phone die or something. I'm not in Forks, but everything's okay, and I'll explain it later.